Welcome back to episode 337 of the Tall Boy Radio podcast. And as we always say, who knows where it goes when the beer flows? Well, that beer is flowing back in time tonight as we take a look back in history and cast an eye on a very specific part of history. And maybe we'll delve into a few other matters as well. Now, there's no guest tonight. Unfortunately, he did let me know he wasn't going to be available. I'm assuming he's watching the Eurovision Song Contest, but he says otherwise. But we're not going to take his word for it. But I am joined by a guest tonight. So, Darren, did you want to say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, everyone. Yes, so I am a reenactor of the American Civil War, but also I'm a podcast host myself. My podcast has been going 5 years. And as we get into our conversation, you'll learn a little bit more of how everything sort of intertwines and comes together.
Indeed, indeed. So, yeah, 5 years of doing a podcast, I can tell you from our own sake, is a challenge. And we spoke about that at the start. But the first thing I want to ask you about as well, because for me, this is what was unique about, your story, is we're going to be talking about American Civil War reenactment, which I've been fascinated with for quite a while, actually. But you can tell, folks, by this gentleman's accent that he is not American and he's not based in the US. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved with that.
Okay, so I'm going to go right back now. So I'm not old, but I'm 40 odd years old. And back when I was 20, I joined a society called the Sealed Knot, which is not American Civil War. It's the English Civil Wars. And I did that for 18 years as a pikeman. It was a lot of drinking, a lot of, as we said, we used to go out, booze and bash, go and fight out on the battlefield in the afternoon and go and get completely, absolutely ruined in the beer tent afterwards. And that still goes on today. But at the same time, we used to do joint events with the Southern Skirmish Association, which I'm a member of now. And again, both of these societies, believe it or not, ladies and gents, were formed in 1968. So they're over 50 years old, both of these societies. But the Sealed Knot has always been slightly bigger. And back then, the Sealed Knot, even today, they have their own sort of events, whereas the Southern Skirmish Association, where it's a teeny little bit smaller, back in the 90s, yes, they would have had their own events, but they have to go to multi-periods because there just isn't the numbers to be able to put on their own events. But anyway, the reason why I ended up getting into the Southern Skirmish Association is because I kept seeing their camps when we did these joint events and thinking, I really love to go and do that one day, but that day never came because it just didn't, you know what it's like. You say, I'm going to go and do that one day. And it never ended up happening. But the American Civil War fascination starts in the Sealed Knot because my mate, Tony Whalen, who, I tell you what, he could sniff out a pub from anywhere. my mate Tone, he got to the battle, he put his tent up and he was off. And if you weren't with him, he's gone. He's like, where's Tony? He's at the pub. Come on, we need to go too, So that's Tony, he's a legend of the Sealed Knot. But he came to an event with a box of VHS videos. And inside this box, was the Waterloo movie from the 70s. There's a Cromwell movie, but most importantly, there was the two videos of Gettysburg, the movie. And so, I took them home and he was like, yeah, I'll have these. I don't need these. I've got them already. I thought I'll watch them one day. And I did watch Gettysburg one day. And that was it. I was just absolutely transfixed by the uniforms, the battle, the story. I thought, I want to know more, so that's what sort of leads me into the American Civil War.
That's fascinating. First of all, great story, great way to get into it as well. It intrigues me because I've got a little bit of American lineage, you know what I mean, on my dad's side. My grandfather was American. He's from Oklahoma. So that's where my interest comes from, just because it was such a formative part of US history. To get sucked into it like that doesn't surprise me. First of all, what does surprise me with it, though, is that there's somewhere in the UK where you can go out and do that. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have thought there'd be anything like that over here, but obviously there is.
Yeah, and again, like I said, so 1968, four guys, and I've got their names as well. So we Bill Hayward, Laurie Watson, Terry Boniface, and Vic Farrer. They all loved the American Civil War and they wanted to reenact it. Now, we say that obviously Southern Skirmish Association was formed in 1968, but we believe that they were doing something before that time. But at that time as well, it was very hard to get the uniforms. But also, what you've got to remember is the 50s and the 60s is the heyday of the Western and the John Wayne movies and stuff like that. Now, a lot of them are based around the Civil War. And people, and not only that, you had cigarette cards and baseball cards with Civil War generals on in that time period. And they just loved that period. So they wanted to reenact it, probably from what they were seeing on the Hollywood screens, And so that's how they ended up getting together and saying, well, actually, let's reenact it. And again, they had trouble getting hold of the uniforms at first. And I was told that, I think in the early days, obviously, they used to have to wear blue jeans and stuff just because it's a similar color to what the Union soldiers would wear. But eventually they started getting the uniforms and they could, reenact it better. But yeah, it's all down to those guys. But it is the oldest reenactment society that does the American Civil War outside of the US. And again, as far as the Sealed Knot's concerned, I think they're a little bit older than SOSCAN, but not by much, a few months, I would say. But there is an interest here. Also, we have a round table in the UK, which I'm also a member of. So the American Civil War Round Table UK is actually one of the oldest round tables. It's not the oldest, but it's one of the oldest, and that was formed in 1953. Wow. And it's still going today. Although it started off as the Confederate Research Club down in, I believe, in Southampton, and then on the 100th anniversary of the Civil War, they changed it to the American Civil War Roundtable UK. But, we only had our conference. So we have a spring conference. We only had that conference about 4 weeks ago. So it's still active. Of course, the membership's, not young. We can't seem to get younger people interested in it, but there is an interest there, And so, it's fantastic to be part of all this stuff,
I hadn't considered that, actually, to be honest with you, that you would find, you'd find a challenge in finding people to jump on board because, when people have an interest in history, they're going to search these things out. And the fact that they're available, and they're out there. And if you're interested, you're going to have a look to see what there is out there. You join the different groups and you're going to hear about it there. So young people, God, that makes me sound old. I'm only in my 50s. Geez. Young people today aren't interested in history. They should be seeing of themselves.
I'll tell you something. They are, because if you're on Instagram, people that are on Instagram will see there's a massive young sort of history influencer thing going on at the moment, and there's so many of them. There's some great ones as well. And I've been at Chalk History Festival for the last 2 years, and it's the biggest festival in the world. It's founded and run by James Holland, famous World War II historian and author, and Al Murray as well, the comedian. He normally guest stars there and does stand up as a pub landlord on one of the nights. But they last year they had a thing called Chalk Introduces. And they had a lot of, I think there was over 30 odd historians that were under 30 years old. So, but it was all ranging different, of history periods, but it's so fantastic, so there is that interest there. But when it comes to reenacting or the round table, maybe not so. I don't know. It's strange, you do get the odd person turn up. But again, American Civil War is still quite niche in the UK, because people can't relate the tie to Britain. And so that's difficult for people, I think. But I mean, the Sealed Knot as well is fairly popular. I mean, when I was in it, it's a lot bigger. And when my friends before me were in it, it was absolutely huge. And I think obviously COVID's played its part in a lot of things. Hence the reason why I do a podcast, maybe many other people, because I didn't have anyone to talk to. Yeah, so it has a lot to answer for COVID there, but there is an interest from the younger generation, but for some reason when it comes to reenacting, they all want to do Germans. I don't know what that's all about. World War II is the fad, But I think it's because there's more TV shows about it.
Yeah, possibly.
You
Well,
know,
could be people preparing for World War III as well. You can't tell.
Could be. Could be.
Interesting. So, just out of interest, then, so when you watched that Gettysburg film and you started getting hooked on the American Civil War, what are the characters that really sucked you in?
So there's one character called Lawrence Joshua Chamberlain, and again, obviously, once you go away and learn the real history, because again, so what you've got to think of, Gettysburg is based off a book written in the 70s called Killer Angels. So the narrative of the story is it follows a couple of people's stories throughout that battle. Now, it was the largest battle in North America. I think it's the largest 3-day battle. 60, I think it's around about 60,000 people casualties from that 3 days. But you've got some of the main characters in it from the Civil War, which are Robert E. Lee, very famous Confederate general. You've got James Longstreet, who's featured in it. You've got Joshua Chamberlain, and General Hancock, I think, is one of the others. But they sort of focus on their sort of individual stories. Now, there's a famous part of the second day is called Little Round Top, and the Union Army is basically their last line of defense. And Joshua Chamberlain with the 20th Maine is put out to this extreme left side of the battlefield, and he's told, you cannot move from this spot, you have to defend it until the last man. And those movie scenes are amazing. But when you start getting into more of the history, you start learning there's obviously more people involved in that whole narrative and story. But Josh, and I'm not knocking Joshua, I love him to bits, but he was also a writer, so he wrote a good story. But give him his due, he went back to that battlefield every year for every anniversary. But the only one he didn't go back to was the last one when he was too ill, which I think was in 1914. So that shows you how special that place was for him. But that character is fascinating. The scenes are amazing. They did a bayonet charge down this hill. Now the Confederates are coming up there all day long, or not all day long, all afternoon long, and it's hot. This is middle of summer in Pennsylvania. It's absolutely, and they run out of bullets basically. And he's like, well, what are we going to do? He says, well, we're going to have to bayonet charge. And apparently he didn't even get a chance to shout charge. Of course, in the movie, you hear the word charge, but it's just a fascinating part of the story, But I mean, the movie's 4 hours long, You really get sucked into that story. But it's wanting to know what happened before and after. And also trying to, because again, movies are there for entertainment. So they're not always accurate as far as history is concerned. So, I'm sort of undiagnosed ADHD. I need to know the real story behind it, if you know what I mean.
I don't think you'd be a very good historian if you weren't.
No.
No, absolutely. That's fascinating. And good afternoon to Stella Beard as well, who's joined us on YouTube. So in terms of that, then, so you're reenacting these events. What does a reenactment weekend look like? What's involved?
Right. So firstly, when you live in a terraced house, a lot of bloody backache from getting the stuff down from the loft and from the shed and going through my little terrace, because I haven't got a backyard. Like, I've got a back garden, but I haven't got any access from there. So I have to take everything through the house. And then when you live in a terraced house, you haven't got anywhere to bloody park. And then Billy up the road decides to take your bloody parking spot, and it's like, bloody hell, I need to get my stuff in the car, So, I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's all right. So first you've got to play Jenga in the car, because the thing is, so this is the funny thing. So American Civil War reenacting, when I took the dive into that, is the opposite to the Sealed Knot, whereas the Sealed Knot has a very small living history side of things, whereas the American Civil War is full on living history. So you've got to have the correct tent, and all that. It doesn't matter what you have inside as long as the tent's correct. But, this stuff's bulky. And as you go on through the years, you end up accumulating more stuff. And I mean, seriously, sometimes I take a picture of before and after, and it's just crazy. And you're clattering down the road with these things in the back, sliding around everywhere. You open the boot and everything falls out, it's crazy. And then you get there. And the worst thing that can happen is you're the first one there, because you're like, I don't know the layout. Where am I supposed to put my tent? because they have it set up like the Union Army anyway, because I'm in the Union Army, have it set up the way it would have been if you was in camp. So they have, again, it'll be put into regiments. We have 3 regiments within the infantry. So they'll have streets and the tents are set up along that street. And at the end, you'll have the officer's tent. So you've got to have it set up a certain way. You just can't just turn up and put your tent up. And the Confederates do their own thing. They do it a different way because they're a little bit smaller. But there's a set way of doing it, And so that can be a bit of a pain. But it's such a great thing to be involved with. It's not just the reenacting side of things; it's the social side of things. It becomes your family.
Yeah.
The Sealed Knot's a lot bigger, but Soscan is a lot smaller, and so I didn't know hardly any people in the Sealed Knot. Obviously you knew your good buddies in your regiment, and sort of like your, that would probably be about it. You would bump into people that you recognise all the time, but it's a lot bigger community. Whereas I walked into the Southern Skirmish Association, and it's really small, and you get to know every single person. And there's some great characters, some nice people. But what you do find as well is that the Union don't really socialise with the Confederates either. So although we're all friends and we all wave at each other, they'll do their thing and we do our thing, and also you normally stay in your little regiments as well. We will mix sometimes, but there's a great social side and great social aspect to reenacting, especially at multi-period events,
I was going to ask that, though, to be honest, about the Union Army and the Confederate Army, whether you stay in character and there's a little bit of beef between you on and off the field, if you'll pardon the reference. But that's interesting that you don't associate with each other. Do you associate with each other in the beer tents as well afterwards, though?
Yeah, but again, you tend to sort of stay with, your people, although, we do mix with the others, but me, for instance, I'm a Sealed Knotter, so all I want to do at 5 o'clock when the public go home is go out, have my dinner, get some beers out, get the music on, get up the beer tent,
Yeah.
And so that's me. I like a party, Some just stay in camp and like sitting around the fire, So, but it's all great, But I mean, and the Confederates sort of like have a massive campfire and they all sit around it singing songs. But sometimes we'll go over and join them, there was we've had it a couple of times where, because they've got their own band, a proper string band like you would have had in the Civil War period. And so we go over to their camp, or if it's someone's birthday that we know, we'll go over and celebrate with them for a couple of hours. It's fantastic community, it really is. But I like the banter as well. So when I arrive, I always put a washing line up with my friend's tent next to me and put a big American flag up, and I'm hoping that it's facing the Confederates because I want them to see it, that we're here. Or I'll say, oh, look, it's them smelly Confederates again, It's all the camaraderie as well, but it's all meant in good faith, we're all good friends, really.
Oh no, that is amazing. That is amazing. So, I presume then, do you reenact then specific scenes, specific battles, and do you do various?
Yes. They will do sometimes, yeah. They'll have a script, but I'm just an infantryman and a private, so I just get told to do this and I go and do it, But yeah, they'll sort of, it never really goes to plan because there'll be something that goes wrong somewhere along the lines. We do use pyros sometimes. And of course, we are in the 21st century, so health and safety. They'll have people out there with flags when they've got pyros. If it's a certain flag, you can't cross a certain part of the battlefield until they've finished setting off their pyros, because obviously it's dangerous. But sometimes it takes them a little while to get them to work, and the crowd are probably thinking, what are they doing? Why are they just all standing there? So there's lots of things that go wrong. And then, of course, we're firing real muskets as well. We have, proper, although they're on a shotgun license because they're smoothbore, we have reproductions of what they would have had at the time. Some people do have but you need a different license and it's harder to get hold of. But we do fire real black powder, which is quite a thrill. especially when you're standing in the ranks and you're all standing shoulder to shoulder like a Civil War soldier did, and all getting ordered to fire. That's quite cool. Until
So,
someone pops a cap in your ear.
so these weapons are genuine weapons then? I'm
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so there's very strict rules around it. There's we have to have powder monkeys. We'll have a dedicated someone that looks after the powder. It gets issued to us at a certain time. We sign a document. After the battle, we have to give all that powder back. So there's a couple of people, like I said, have different types of licenses. So they'll have where they can look after the powder. I'm only allowed to access it when I'm at an event. But obviously, I keep my rifle all the time. So I've got a reproduction Springfield 1861, which I would have had in the Union Army. Some people have a British Enfield P53. I did own both at one time, but I am a reenactor. It's like I have both. But I prefer the Springfield. It's bloody heavy, though. God, that's heavy. I mean, when you're standing there all day marching around with it, yeah, it can be quite heavy. But it is so much fun. But there's so much safety involved in it as well. What people don't realise. That powder then has to be stored somewhere and guarded overnight. So normally it'd be the event organizer will organize something like that. But there has been times where we've had to have our own person that camps next to the gunpowder store and look after it, because it's, at the end of the day, it's quite dangerous. It has to be locked up and everything. Yeah, and the police can do spot checks on you and want to see your license. And yeah.
Yeah, so obviously, I'm not suggesting you go out and cause trouble on the weekend, but you don't want to have that license taken off of you.
No, certainly not. No, because if you do, you do have enacts. People can go out there, because obviously we do have people in the ranks that, and again, it depends where you live in the country. Now in Kent, it's it's a lot harder than it was when I first started in 2019 or 2020. But Kent's not so strict on certain things, whereas other counties are. But also other counties, like, say, for instance, Cornwall and Devon, that's quite hard to get a license there because they're covering two counties. Also, they had some horrible instances that happened a few years back with firearms, so that has a knock-on effect. They don't have many people within that sort of area, of that policing area, and again, like I said, they're covering two counties, and you think that's very rural. So there's a lot of shotguns in Devon. There's a lot of shotguns in Cornwall, because it's very rural. I know most places are fairly rural, but you know what I mean. It's just more difficult. But Kent seems to be a lot easier. But I know people that live up in other areas that really struggled. I mean, one of our friends has had 2 years. He's had his license put in to get one, and he still hasn't got it because there's such a backlog, and because they keep changing the laws and everything.
That's mad. So if you were to put to fixate on weaponry, I'm not a nutcase.
That's all right. You're right.
If you were to then put like the whatever you call them, the balls in, and the little lead balls inside there with the gunpowder, you could physically fire that weapon.
You could fire you could fire a round ball. Yeah, you could fire a projectile out of that. Yeah,
that's mad. See, I had this assumption that it's going to be almost like, I'm not taking a mickey when I say this, like a cap gun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some thing that
I know, it's the real thing. Yeah, it's
that's
absolutely 100% real. Although they're reproductions, they're and again, like I said, originally they would have been rifled, because a rifled musket was a terrible thing. So going back to more of a historical context of the rifled musket, it comes about. Well, it's around quite a long time, actually. I think there's sharpshooters during Napoleonic Wars, and I think they had sort of rifled sort of weapons, and they could fire long distances. But when it becomes standard during the Crimean War, which is a British war in 1853, and they start rifling these muskets. And then, of course, when the American Civil War kicks off in 1861, the way they're fighting, their tactics, they fight shoulder to shoulder Napoleonic tactics. And this rifle can shoot 500 yards, So compared to a smoothbore musket, which is very inaccurate, yeah, it kills people and it's devastating as well. But then they invent a bullet as well called the mini ball, which expands in the barrel and spins on those grooves, which makes it deadly accurate. And some of the injuries and things that are caused by this bullet, by the way they fight in the Civil War, is just horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. I mean, the amputations, there's like piles of arms and legs sitting outside medics' tents where they just got to hack them off, because once that bullet goes in you and shatters the bones inside, if it goes in your stomach, well, you might as well just go and lie down because you're done. So yeah.
Horrific, absolutely horrific, yeah. But that has fascinated me. That has fascinated me. So, in terms of uniforms and what have you like that, then how close to period are they?
Okay, so yeah, they're pretty good. Yeah, some are better than others. And again, as before we went on air, he's talking about the differences between some reenactors. Now, I sort of class myself. Now, I again during that period when the public are there, everything modern's got to go away. You've got to be in character. And my uniform is up to standard, and Joe Bloggs is not going to know. But there are some guys that like to have the proper stitching and the proper buttons and the proper, but you've got to pay the price for that. It's not cheap, and it's going to come from the US as well. But I'm not knocking those guys, because it's fantastic that they do it that way. They also like living like that as well. They like sleeping under the stars and sleeping in shelter halves and eating the way they did. But that's not for me. But yeah, no, everything we have has got to be a certain standard. Let's put it like that. And if it's not, you'll get told about it. And again, we're not, like if you was new coming in tomorrow yourself, Beansy, I would say to you, well, we can lend you the stuff until you get the right stuff, So we lend people stuff. And if it's not right, and we can think we can get away with it, say, for instance, like your shoes or something like that, then it's all about sort of blending it in, so like, just so it looks, and you hope that nobody notices. But I mean, if you walked around our living history camp during the day, it's pretty impressive. People are quite good with making sure. And the thing is, if you don't want anything modern on show, then just close your tent flaps, as simple as that, and shut the door. I tend to have mine looking fairly authentic-ish inside, but then if I was a real American Civil War private, I wouldn't be in a single A-frame tent on my own. But I'm quite happy with how it looks inside mine. I hide. You just hide stuff. You put it under the bed, or you just, if you've got your phone on you, make sure it's on silent. It's in a bag. It's not. And people do get told off. Be like, why have you got that? And you just got to be in that time period for that time, But that's what we do it for. We want to experience that sort of. Well, I wouldn't want to experience it really, but because it would be horrible. But yeah, it's fantastic, really. The effort that people go to show off that history, not just the history, in that way, but the clothing,
Oh, that's awesome. I get it. Yeah, I presume your ringtone is something like Dixie, just in case it does go off.
Actual fact, my ringtone is actually on silent all the time because I'm a night shift worker, and then I always forget to turn it back on. So I always get complained at when, why don't you answer the phone? Well, because it's on silent all the time. But if it was, it would be Battle Cry of Freedom. But yeah.
Fair play. Yeah. So in terms of it, so onlookers, when they're watching this, and they're watching from a distance, so the uniform is going to, you're not going to see anybody in Jordans. You're not going to see anybody with, a phone in one hand and a water pistol in the other. You take it very seriously. But what is one aspect that onlookers would never notice, but is really, really important to the reenactment societies?
Cool. You got me there. I don't know. I think it's. I don't know. You've really stumped me there. I don't know. I mean, for me, it's even if they did know, even if they were to notice, that would annoy me. So I don't know. I can't really answer that.
No. I just wondered because in terms of an onlooker, that they've got an idea that what they're seeing in front of them, whether they're keen historians or just a member of the public who's turned up on the day to see what it is that you're doing, you know, they're not going to have necessarily the insights that you have. So I was just wondering if there's anything that was really important to you guys. It's not. If it's not, it's fine. That's not a problem. So
I think it is as well. Like I've gone through just, again, portraying that in the right uniform, in the right. But again, like I said, also before we went on air, like my knowledge of the history side of things is really good. But there are some guys that only do it for the experience, so they don't tend to. Do you know what I mean? So I think that would be a different answer for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting enough. So for the folks at home who are listening in, thank you very much. But yeah, we were chatting just before we joined in. The one thing I will say about Darren is he really is a history buff. He knows his stuff. It's really, really obvious when we talk to him. And I think if you're listening to this episode, you've already got a good sense of that yourself. So have you ever done, there's the people out there that take it very, very literally, eating the food that was available at the time. Have you ever done, I know it's not for you. Like we said at the start, I would miss my hotel comforts. Have you ever done it for the full weekend?
No, not that side of things. No, never. Now, if you was, like I said, if you was to look into my tent, you'd think, oh, that looks fairly authentic. But, like I said, it's all about hiding stuff. So it's very comfortable in there. I've got a really nice mattress, but I've made sure. So there used to be like a fabric back in the day called ticking mattress or something like that, and it's like I can't explain what it looks like, but it's got like lines on it. So I couldn't believe it. One day I walked into Asda and there's this quilt set that looks like that. I'm like, I'm buying that. And so it looks like a mattress. So what I do is I put that on the bed. It's got a duvet in it, and then I have a proper Civil War blanket, thickness wise, and I put that on. It looks like but when I lay down, it's so comfy, it's unbelievable. I mean, do you know what? I've never been cold ever in that tent because of that Civil War blanket and a quilt as well. So it's all about hiding stuff, It's like, but yeah, no, I like my home comforts too, mate. And for me, it's like, no, I don't want to sleep out in a shelter half. I just don't want to do it. Sorry.
No, that idea doesn't appeal to me. It really doesn't appeal at all. So the experience for some, though, is fairly authentic then, you know what I mean? In terms of
100%. I mean, these guys are great, They're fantastic how they do it. They have like rations for the weekend, and like I said, they'll sleep in a shelter half. They put their sleep on, and I bet it's nice and comfy though. I mean, they'll have a couple of guys under there and sleep how they did. Thing is, in the time period, that's how most Civil War soldiers would have been. They wouldn't have slept in static camps anyway. They was on the road most of the time, especially in Virginia and out west. They were all traveling all the time, so they would just sleep in the bush. Or get, like I said, so there's a thing called a shelter half. And basically what it is, I would have half, you would have half. We'll get some sticks and we make a little makeshift tent out of it. And you could probably get about 4 or 5 people under there. So and if it's cold, you're all going to snuggle together, So, yeah, a bit of spooning, Civil War spooning.
Yeah. I was sold up until that point.
Yeah, exactly.
No, fair play. So while you're doing this, then obviously you are a history buff. You're fascinated by history. Yeah. What have you learned from the experience of reenacting it? What do you take away?
I just take away being able to share that knowledge with other people, because the thing is, as you mentioned, a lot of people in the UK are quite naive to it when it comes to the Civil War, obviously, because they don't know about it. And so 9 times out of 10, reenactments themselves, there are quite a few history buffs that come through the doors, but remember that some people just come for a day out. And so they're not historically minded. So if you can, when I go away at the weekend, if I can share a little bit of information and help somebody understand it a bit better, then for me, I've done my job. And there's nothing more than I love doing than boring someone to death with when they ask the wrong question. I mean, when you're interested in something, somebody will ask you the wrong question, and I mean, you can tell straight away when they're bored because their eyes glaze over. But, hence the reason why I probably started a podcast, because I wanted to talk to someone that's interested in it. But, you do get a lot of people that come and do know their history, and you're like, oh, right, I've got to change the way I talk to this person, because they know more than than me, but it's about sharing that information. People just don't realize how, important this war was to the US. It's so important, so integral in their story. But also people don't realize the connection to Britain either. And so 50,000 Brits fought in the American Civil War.
Yeah.
And there was 200,000 Irish, 200,000 Germans. So in some way, you could kind of say that it's not really an American Civil War. Well, it is, but it's fought by Europeans.
Yeah, I mean, you're right on the money there. Funnily enough, we had a guy on a couple of episodes back talking about Billy the Kid, and one of the things he talked about coming on and doing a second episode about was actually the British connection to Billy the Kid, and all the historical characters that connected through him. And funnily enough, myself, when I visited the Alamo in Texas, like I say, I love US history, and I'm fascinated by America in general. And you go inside the Alamo, and they got the flags of everybody who participated. So it's not just the American flag in there. And as a proud Welshman, I was delighted to see that there was a Welsh flag in there. That there was a Welsh representatives in the Battle of the Alamo. So yeah, I was fascinated by that. In terms of reenacting, then, what has any part of it changed your views on the American Civil War? We asked what the takeaways were. Has any parts of it sort of changed your mind when you're reenacting it? And did you have an idea of how it worked? And actually participating in it makes it feel just a little bit different.
Yeah, it does. It makes you feel a lot more. I had that surreal moment when I first, because again, like I said, I was doing the sealed knot stuff, and that was as a pikeman, and you go out there and you do these huge rugby scrums called pike pushes, and it freaking hurts. And I wanted to change because I was getting older, and I thought, you get broken ribs and smash your nose in and everything like that. I thought I wanted a bit of a slower life, so that looked. But also, I was really interested in the history side of things. I thought, right, I want something a bit slower paced, and it is because it's just slower paced. But anyway. Sorry, I've lost the track of what you asked me now. Sorry, I do this all the time.
No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I was just wondering if anything about the American Civil War, when you reacted, has changed your opinion.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. So that's what I was talking about. So the first time we did this charge. The first time I was involved in the major battle. I thought I was in the movie. It felt like I was in a movie. And every time you're out there, it's just so great to smell that you're smelling and feeling similar things to what not obviously accurately, but to what them soldiers, and seeing what they would have seen, as far as being part of a regiment and going out and shooting together, and getting shouted at, and cannons going off, because we have artillery as well. I forgot to mention that earlier. We have a couple of small ones, but we have near enough a full size Parrot gun, I think it is. Oh my God, that's loud. When we can get it there, because you've got to carry it on the back of a truck, But yeah, no, it's just amazing, to be in their footprints, and be in their shoes. Sorry, that's what I was meant to say.
No, I know what you mean. And the smell of black powder, what's that like when you smell that?
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, but it don't taste very nice when you accidentally rip the cartridge and it's in you spitting it out. And then, then you get a bloody misfire. That's a pain in the backside, because obviously we don't ram on the battlefield for safety reasons. So if you was loading a rifle, you'd load in 9 times, they call it. A soldier should have been able to fire 3 a minute, like they say in the film, not the film, the series Sharp. But black powder, you've got to tap the gun, and sometimes it doesn't go all the way down to the bottom of the barrel, and you get misfires, and it can be quite a scary place as well sometimes. I remember when we was on a really small battlefield once, they had pyros and cannons going off, and because it was so small, the bangs of the cannons were, you could feel it,
Yeah.
all the shock waves through the air. And that's the only time I think when doing the American Civil War, I felt like a little bit scared about it.
Oh no, I can imagine. I know. I mean, it's not similar in any way, but you know, I've been up on Edinburgh Castle, and obviously they fire the cannons up there to signify the time of day. And I wasn't paying attention. I nearly shit myself, to be honest with you. It was
Yeah.
that loud, and you feel it in your chest when it goes off.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was used to it in the sealed knot anyway because they always had loads of cannons, and they'd always stop us right next to the damn thing before they fire it, because obviously the safety thing. So they'd stop you. Right, stop here. Oh, right next to the cannon. Thanks a lot. Have a care. Bang. You know. Oh, for goodness sake, I can't hear anything now. But you sort of get used to it. It was that thumping, and you could feel it in your body. You know, that one time, and I was just like, whoa. Could you imagine being a real soldier in that situation? I don't think I'd be standing there very long. I think I'd have run away.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
You
100%.
know, these guys were so brave. It's unbelievable. I don't think anybody will ever understand what being in that situation. And again, you know, being a reenactor is fine, but if you was ever in that real situation, that would be scary, you know.
Oh, hey man, I would be what's known as a conscientious objector. I'm sure.
Yeah, to be a deserter, we'd get court-martialed and shot probably.
Hey
But
man, and who could blame you though? Who could blame you under those
yeah,
circumstances? So one thing I wanted to ask you about then, in terms of the reasons why the American Civil War was fought,
hmm
what are the moral complexities then of recreating that? Because you know what I mean, it's a difficult conversation at
yeah, it
times,
is.
isn't it?
Yeah, so there's lots of sort of little answers to that, but obviously one of the biggest elephant that's in the room is the question of slavery. So now there's still arguments in the US that go on today. They argue and argue about it even today. And there's people in the South, people in the North that argue about it. And someone will go, well, it was about states' rights. Oh, it was about slavery. Well, it was about both, it's about everything. But also there's a misconception sometimes that, just because someone's a Confederate, they must have owned an enslaved person, which is not true, and always try and explain to people about, and again, it's an absolutely horrible thing that happened. The war was always going to happen. It is pretty much slavery that starts it all because they want to expand it west. And then obviously this Republican Party that comes in, Abraham Lincoln, is against it. This party is against expansion. They're not against slavery at that point. Obviously, the war aims change in 1863 when they bring in the Emancipation Proclamation. But slavery is the heart of their constitution, But the way that the South see it is that you're messing with our economy. It's tied to our economy. We're talking about in today's money, I think it was worth like $2 billion. And this was all tied to their economy. So that's why they were concerned about it. But as I said, your average soldier wouldn't have been able to afford to own an enslaved person because that was a very expensive commodity. And you had to be rich to own an enslaved person, and so we always you always get that question come up, Also, I've had some people that don't understand history and go, oh, there's a Confederate flag, that's racist. And it's like, you have to try and explain it. That's a battle flag, and then you have to, like what I've just sort of explained there, you have to try and explain it to some people. They just don't get it. They see a Confederate uniform and they just think, racist, it's difficult a subject sometimes, but we have to talk about this stuff because it happened. That's the thing. And that's the point of sometimes doing what we do, because we have to educate people that, there's more to the story than you know.
No, 100%. And I think you're quite right there in everything that you've just said. In terms of repeating history, reenacting history, the danger is if we don't learn from the mistakes that we made in the past, that we'll make them again in the future. And there is a very good quote about it, which I'll fail to get about. Yeah. And I think you're 100% right there. There is that image of the Confederate flag, but again, it'd be like, maybe World War II reenactment. And not having, the swastika or what have you. Yes, it makes us uncomfortable to look at it, but that's the reason. Yeah, that's the reason why we fought against it, and that's why we reenact it, to teach people about it today. So, what reaction do you get then when you head out there and you're doing this?
It's always very positive, I will say. Now, there's nothing more, and again, as I said, COVID really affected the Southern Skirmish Association. A lot of the Confederate Army are older age, and quite a few of the members are older age, and it scared them. They didn't want to come back. It took us a little while to get people to come back, but the diehards are all there. But a couple of years ago, so there are 2 American Civil War reenactment societies in the UK. So I want to give a big shout out to the ACWS. So we obviously are called the Southern Skirmish Association, and we cover Southern England. So we cover most of Southern England up to I would say maybe around Oxford, somewhere around about there. And then there's another association that covers the northern part of England called the ACWS. They're not as old as the Southern Skirmish Association, but they're very good friends of ours. And so they were having a problem getting an event for a bank holiday weekend, and we do a massive major one at Detlins. It's called Military Odyssey in Maidstone in Kent. And they guested with us, and it bulked our ranks up. And last year, standing there, seeing all those, because it hadn't been that big for a long time, seeing all those blue uniforms in a line doing parade, when the major comes out and makes us do we do like an authentic parade, and then we had to march off down to the battlefield, and we was at the back of the column getting to see all those blue uniforms and the boots marching down to the battlefield. That was quite special,
Yeah.
So that for me is like, wow, but yeah, they come along normally to that, and we do also guest with them sometimes when they have an event somewhere further up north. But a lot of our members don't really like traveling too far these days, so it's difficult. It's difficult balancing act to try and convince people to do certain events because they might be too far away. It's we've got one coming up this weekend actually. It's called Overlord. It's called the show. It's down near Portsmouth, I believe. We're trying to get a lot of the members to go a bit further west because it's unfair on some that live down that way. But unfortunately, some people just don't want to travel.
No, it's. I mean, it makes me sad when you talk about the likes of COVID and the damage that's done to that, because we can all have on it and how that was managed, but it just feels a real shame that folks are missing out on something they loved and were passionate about prior to this, just because of something that happened and potentially could happen again. Let's play fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I just want to say hello to Fernando Bastidas as well.
I know this guy. He's a good friend of mine, actually. He runs a very good Facebook group.
Okay.
American Civil War Facebook group. So big shout out to him. He's a good friend of mine. He brought me a great guest once as well from Chile that I interviewed a few months back. So thank you, mate. Thanks for doing that.
Oh, no, fair play. And all the way from Venezuela as well.
Oh, yeah. Sure. A Venezuelan Civil War fan. He loves the Civil War.
That's incredible. That's incredible. It just goes to show, doesn't it? Just out of interest then, what do Americans make of the fact that you're reenacting it over here in the UK?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes we do get Americans come, through the camps, and they're like, what the hell? We didn't know you was going to be here. They just can't understand it, And then when we start talking about that British connection again, because obviously, so part of my story is in 2021, we was finishing up an event, and one of the officers from one of the other regiments came up to everyone and said, "Oh, this woman has contacted the Southern Skirmish Association, and she wants reenactors to go to her great grandfather's dedication." And we're like, "Oh, that's quite interesting, isn't it?" Anyway, so he fought in the Civil War. He's British. He went over there in 1850s, ended up enrolling as a substitute, went and fought in the Union Navy as well, came home. Then obviously my friend Gina found out about his story from her mother, and started putting the breadcrumbs together and piecing all this together. And they found out he was buried in a London cemetery. And they went there thinking there's going to be this amazing grave, and they got there and it's all covered over. And she's like, "What? This is a tragedy." So she started digging. She found out there was a London branch of Civil War veterans, and he was number 8 of that. And so she had a dedication for him. She had a headstone shipped over from the US, federal one. So we had a dedication. And I was part of an organization I am now, and their social media manager, called Emerging Civil War. They're based in the US, Fredericksburg, Virginia. And I said to my friend Chris Mikowski, can I do a video about this and we put it on your YouTube channel? Yeah, no worries. Anyway, 6 months down the line in 2022, we formed, oh, it's such a mouthful. I don't know why she called it this, Monuments for UK Veterans of the American Civil War Association. And there's another one of my good friends, Noel Harrison from Virginia. But yeah, no, so we formed this, and so far we've had 8 dedications. We have one a year.
Fantastic.
We rededicate British American Civil War veterans.
That's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. I love to hear this. You know what I mean? When people use their hobbies and their passions for something really, really positive like that, I think that's fantastic. And fair play for doing that. I think that is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And yes, hello Noel, who is in Virginia, and who says, "Great."
Noel is a Civil War legend, actually, from Fredericksburg. Now he worked for the Park Service and is just recently retired. Big shout out to Noel Harrison, very well known and very, very well liked within the Civil War community. So thank you, Noel.
There you go. There you go. We're honored. We're honored that you've joined us. Thank you very much. So one of the things that I have to ask you, the wonderful UK weather, does that ever?
It's only, and I'm going to touch wood now. I've
now
obviously during don't curse it now. Since I've been in, and again, we call it SOSCAN for short. So I keep wanting to call it SOSCAN, but like people are like, what's SOSCAN? But that's what we call it for short, or the Southern Scam Association. Since I've been in it, the weather's been all right. I've had one bad one, and that was a couple of years ago at a place called Capel Military Show. And the ground it was always fantastic, but the ground was always dry and powdery, and it's in fields, So we thought one day, if that rains, that's going to be a nightmare. And it rained one evening, and it just turned this dust into absolute sludge. I mean, this is the beginning of July, even still. But of course, people trying to get off with modern cars, it's not easy. I had a few really bad experiences in the Sealed Knot, where we basically couldn't do anything all weekend because it absolutely bucketed it down all weekend. So we basically just sat in a tent drinking beer and then went out in the evening, never had a battle or anything. But as far as SOSCAN's concerned, most of them are in Kent and Essex and Surrey, and so the weather's normally quite nice. It's normally quite sunny. I normally go back to work and go, where have you got that tan from? Well, I've been standing outside all bloody weekend. That's where.
Fair play. Well, as you Southerners often say, it's grim up north, so we're used to this terrible weather.
Yeah, we haven't done one up there yet. That's probably why.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah. So anyway, one thing I did want to just ask you before we talk about your podcast, then.
Yeah.
If you could go back and witness one event from the American Civil War as a bystander, not someone necessarily involved, what would that be?
Wow, I'm going to have to put myself right at the end of the war, and I'm going to be sitting in the same room as the room where Robert E. Lee signs the surrender over to Ulysses S. Grant. And so the surrender at Appomattox, although it's symbolically the end of the Civil War, it's not. So this happens in April of 1865. Grant and Lee meet each other in Appomattox Courthouse. There's a fantastic documentary called the Ken Burns series, which was made in the 90s, which actually made reenacting numbers boost here in the UK, along with the movie Gettysburg in 93. But there's a part in that. So there's a guy called Wilmer McLean that owns a house on the first battlefield of the Civil War, which is called Bull Run. And in that program, he apparently said, well, the war starts in my front yard and finished in my front parlor. And the reason he says the front parlor, because it's Wilmer McLean's house in Appomattox where the war finishes. How weird is that? Now, he moves there because it's a little bit further from where the fighting's taking place. And then all of a sudden, in 1865, the army comes rolling through Appomattox. He thinks, I've got away from all that. and they use his. Now, apparently, he ran out on the street and got them to come into his house, and that's why they had to surrender there. But I would want to be a fly in the wall, definitely there, 100%.
Oh yeah, I think you probably picked the best one. That is incredible. That is incredible. Yeah, wow. To witness that would be something. Would be something. Now, one of the things that we want to talk about as well in closing is obviously we're just covering off one episode of this. You have a whole podcast covering off American Civil War and other forms of UK history. Did you want to tell the folks at home a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. And again, another little conversation we was having off camera about people giving people chances. And I'm always going to be thankful to one person, and that is my good friend from Virginia. That's Chris Mikowski. Now, Chris is an amazing historian, amazing author. He also has a fantastic podcast himself. But I saw a live stream and I reached out to him. And this was at the time when I just joined SOSCAN and the world shut down. And I bought all my stuff. I was ready to go, ready to get into the action. And we couldn't do anything because of COVID, obviously stopped everything. And I was rekindling my love for the Civil War, learning all this information. All that information was going in, and I had no one to talk about it to. But anyway, I saw Chris on a live stream for American Battlefield Trust one evening, and I put some questions into the chat, and he took the time to answer them. And I wanted to talk to somebody about the Battle of Fredericksburg, and Chris is a huge expert on that battle. And so I reached out through his platform, Emerging Civil War, which I touched on earlier, which was about 11, 12 years old now. So it's like a blog site. They do books, they do podcasts and everything's involved with the Civil War, and said, would you be willing to come and talk to me about the Battle of Fredericksburg? And he said, yeah, absolutely. Now, at first, I was only going to share this with my fellow reenactors in a little private group. And I thought, nah, this is too good. This needs to go on YouTube. And so on Boxing Day 2020, American Civil War and UK history was born. And the reason I added the UK part is because I love UK history as well. I live in a great place with great history. And I want to share the story of history with everybody and about everything. And most recently, I've started some off-spin ones because I couldn't talk about anything else but American Civil War and UK history. But and then in 2024, I think it was, I took over as manager of Emerging Civil War's social media team. And I've got a fantastic team. And I go over to Spotsylvania, Virginia, every year in August for their annual conference. And it also allows me access to some of the top historians within that field. And, recently I've recorded one with a guy called Dr. Gary Gallagher. And when it comes to the American Civil War, this guy is the man you want on. But again, if it wasn't for Emerging Civil War and Chris Mikowski giving me that chance, I'm not sitting here now, mate, so, but also joining the Southern Skirmish Association. So, and then I wouldn't have formed this, association for British veterans, and none of it would have happened. So, I owe him a lot of thanks.
No, fair play. Like you say, we discussed at the start, didn't we? The people who make the time of day for you, and there's really, really important people. So I will say this: if you listen to this episode out there, and you are an expert in a field, whether it's American Civil War, whether it's something else, somebody reaches out to you who might just seem like, they may be a little bit green behind the ears or whatever the expression is. Perhaps give them the opportunity, because you don't know where that could lead to. I certainly know some of the guests that we've had on our podcast over the years, never done podcasts before. There's one beer reviewer in mind who guested on there. We said, you've got an absolutely fantastic voice. Rather than just typing up your things online, stick it out there. Add your voice to it. You got a fabulous accent as well, a fabulous Geordie accent, and he's doing wonders now. It's great to see. It's great to see that someone's taken the opportunity. I'm not going to say we launched his career in that. That would be far too unrealistic. But it is wonderful when someone takes the time to talk to you. I totally get that. So for the folks at home, then tell them where they can find your podcast, where they want to, where they're going to want to tune in and find it.
Okay, so there's loads of different ways. Obviously, my main thing is obviously YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. But I'm also recently on a fantastic streaming service in the US, which is a US-based one, which is based similar to History Hit, but it's called History Fix. And of course, that is a streaming platform. You do have to pay a monthly subscription to that, but you're only paying like $5. I mean, it's kind of English pounds, but you get it ad-free. Because how annoying is YouTube when you're trying to watch something and an advert? Although that's good for the person that's created the thing, because you get a little bit of revenue from adverts, but it can be blimmin' annoying. I'm always complaining about it, and I'm thinking in the back of my head, well, that's how people, I suppose, make a little bit of income from YouTube. But YouTube, I've also got a really good social media presence, so Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. X not so much, but because I just can't never get anywhere on that damn thing, and also it's too short. You can't put anything on there. But I'm on all of those channels as well. But there is a link tree linked to my channel, so you find everything on there. But I do have a website as well, and that is www.acw&UK-history, and you will find everything there, including the audio side of things. So we're on the major ones: Spotify, Apple, but anywhere you get your podcast from, guys, and again, I've had some fantastic guests recently, so please go and have a listen.
Indeed. And I tell you what, I'll add that link into the audio description as well of this podcast, so you'll be able to click on the link, head straight to his website, and you'll be able to see everything that they do. And go on, I'll let you read the message there from Fernando.
Oh, blimey, that's a long one, isn't it?
It is a long one, yeah.
Plenty of American Civil War enacts apart from the UK, Germany, Poland, Czech Republic, Italy, Denmark, Norway, and Spain. Oh, okay, yeah.
It's a lot.
It's talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Do you know what? I was actually going to watch that yesterday, and I never got around to it. I really fancied watching that. Yeah, great point, mate.
No, yeah, indeed. Thank you for chiming in. So we like to wrap these things up round about the hour mark, and that brings us nicely towards the end. We're a little bit over, but we make no apologies for that, because I've really enjoyed the content. Darren, really, really, really appreciate you joining us tonight, especially on a Saturday.
I appreciate the invite. I really do. I mean, I'm not doing anything else on a Saturday, mate. I'm too old now,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, next Saturday night I'll be in the beer tent, but
you're making me very envious now.
Well, you can come along. We take guests. I know it's a long drive, but we take you.
So whereabouts are you then next weekend?
So we're down in I can't remember what the little place is called, but it's near Waterlooville. It's a little village over from there. It's called Overlord. It's apparently the biggest show in the south. That's what. Yeah. I went there last year. It's actually fantastic. I met some great young people there actually last year. That it's really weird because they reenact the year that I was born. They reenact 1982, and what's it? The Falkland War of Tigers on Patrol or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, they're fantastic people with great attitudes. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing them again and having a drink with them.
Funnily enough, I was 9 in 1982, and I do remember the Falklands War. It was probably one of the first big conflicts that sort of entered my rather young brain at that time. And I found it very difficult to get my head around that we were fighting over these two islands right next to Argentina, or the Malvinas as they call them over there. I think it is. But yeah, that did sort of grab me as interesting. So yeah, I'm actually in London next weekend when I've got a bunch of Americans over. My cousin's over from Texas, and they want to see a little bit of history of the UK.
They'll get plenty of it. I mean, geez, there's too much. I mean, when I take people to London, I'm like, right, well, you need to make a plan, because it's just layer upon layer, isn't it? As you know.
Yeah, that's it. We start in London. We got I think 4 days in London, and then we head up to Windsor, to Stratford upon Avon, to York, and then we finish in Edinburgh.
Nice.
At the start of June. So
little mini tour of Britain. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, the wife's absolutely delighted with me, sodding off for missing me.
Hey mate, I'm in that position all the time.
Yeah, I missed my wedding anniversary and my son's birthday, so I'm pretty much in the.
As long as you're there for the main ones, that's all that matters. Don't do that.
No. Amen. But no, thank you very much, Darren. Really, really enjoyed this episode. That just leaves it to me then to close out and say thank you for listening. Thank you for everybody who's taken the time to share a message on our YouTube as well, or our Facebook. Well, we've been live on those platforms, and we will be back next week when we'll be talking about something entirely different altogether. Good night.
Friends around the mic, kicking back, all right. Day turns into night, podcast in the spotlight. Sipping on that brew, talking all